Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone who came to join. My name is Kimberly Fiorello, and I'm really here. I am a state representative, but I'm really here as a very interested private citizen. And, this was sponsored by CT 169 Strong. So I'm really grateful to those wonderful people over there who put out the word to get a lot of folks on board. And today we're here to discuss a bill that is coming forth in front of the Connecticut State Legislature. On Wednesday, there's a public hearing, and this bill number is SB 949. It's an act concerning the establishment of money follows the child approach to funding public education. And we would love for folks to come and testify to support this bill. And to help us understand what makes this bill so exciting and so important to Connecticut is Dr. Steve Perry. So I will give it up to Dr. Steve Perry. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Representative Fiorello, and each one of you who've taken the time out of your day. There's so many other things that I'm sure call for your attention, and that you take the time out to have this conversation with us. It speaks to your commitment to the children of Connecticut and the state of Connecticut. It's not enough to say that we care about kids. It's the expectation in each one of us that we show what we care about by putting our time, which is our most precious resource, to our other precious resource, which is our children. In Connecticut, we currently double fund education to the tune of $360 million per year. Every single year, the state of Connecticut pays twice for children. And what that means is we pay for a child to attend their neighborhood school, and we pay for them to attend the actual school in which they are enrolled to the tune of $360 million. That means when a child lives in Middletown, Middletown's public schools count him as a student in Middletown's public schools. And they report that number to the state of Connecticut that he is a Middletown public school student. When that child then enrolls in Breakthrough Magnet School in Hartford, Middletown receives $14,000 for that child, and they send a portion, approximately $6,000, to the child's actual school, which might be Breakthrough, or it might be Vinyl Tech. In the case of the technical high schools, they receive approximately $9,000 per pupil, meaning that's what's collected for them. Yet what they actually receive in tuition from the sending district is about $3,000 to $4,000, about a third of what's collected on their behalf. When they go to an interdistrict school choice program, let's say that child were to go to a nearby suburban school, not Middletown High School, but were to go to HK through their interdistrict choice program. $17,000 accepted on that child's behalf, $11,000 would stay in Middletown, and $6,000 would go to their actual school. So that would be like a person living in New Haven or living in Middletown, getting into UConn, but having to pay 60% of their tuition to Central because Central is closer to them than UConn. Now, in any other scenario, it's laughable. It's unbelievable. No one would do that. Under no circumstances would the state of Connecticut knowingly encourage school systems to count children as currently enrolled in their school system, who they know do not attend the schools in that community. But that is in fact the case. It's called a hold harmless clause. And what it means is that they hold the district harmless for when the children leave. It means that when a kid who's in Hartford public schools who's from Hartford and was supposed to go to Weaver, goes to Prince Tech, Hartford gets to keep the lion's share of that money. No matter which school that child goes to, Hartford gets to keep at least 60% of the tuition that's collected on that child's behalf. So what that means in actual numbers, in a city like Hartford, they report that 19,500 children attend Hartford public schools. 19,500 children attend Hartford public schools. Yet, the city of Hartford and the state of Connecticut is fully aware that over 11,000 children leave Hartford to go to a school other than a Hartford public school every single day. Every single day. They go to magnet schools, VOTEC schools, VOAG schools, they go to charter schools, they go to magnet schools, they go to interdistrict choice schools. All those kids leave Hartford and go to, they're physically enrolled in, they will graduate from, they are at those other schools. And in order to keep that system in place, Connecticut pays for them twice. They put $360 million up from us that never makes its way to the actual kid. What it does in holding harmless is it keeps people employed in Hartford public schools. That's all it does, but it does not teach children with that money. It is a jobs program, and more specifically, it's a union program. That's what it really is. It's saying that those people who are in these schools get to keep these jobs. That's it. There is no justification for it. Some would argue, well, we have to keep Weaver open and we have to keep this seat available for this child, because if we don't keep this seat available for this child, what happens if she comes back? Well, our bill takes care of that. What our bill says is you will be paid in 3 installments. So if the child enrolls in Breakthrough Magnet School in the first marking period, then Breakthrough Magnet School gets that money. They get the full $14,000 that's coming to them. You don't leave any behind in Middletown. Then, if after Christmas, the child says, you know what, I want to go back to Bealefield in Middletown. I don't like the 80-minute ride up to Hartford, or for whatever reason, I want to go back to Bealefield, my sister, brother, cousins, whatever. Then the remainder of that money, the remainder of that tuition would go to Bealefield throughout the rest of the year. So our bill makes it possible for the money to actually follow the child at 3 separate times throughout the year. This is the same thing that happens in New York. In New York City, that has 1 million children, and the entire state of Connecticut only has 500,000. Our schools in New York have to report our daily attendance. And when we report our daily attendance, they prorate, as a charter school, they prorate our tuition. So if you have 100 kids who come 100% of the time, you get 100% of the money. You have 100 kids who come 80% of the time, you get 80% of the money. The citizens of the state of New York say, why am I paying you to teach someone when we're actually not teaching them? So you want all the money, then you get the kids there every day. And you get all of them there every day. So our bill takes into consideration what is pretty much standard throughout the rest of the country. Connecticut's one of the only states that has no mechanism at all to account for the loss of 60% of the children who are counted as enrolled in Hartford Public Schools. There's no mechanism. There's no recourse. That's it. On October 1st, the CFO of Hartford Public Schools says we have 19,500 kids, and you, as the citizens of Connecticut, send them $17,500 per pupil at $19,500, not at $8,000, which is what it really is, $8,500. You send it at $19,500, which means that we're paying for the city of Hartford per child in upwards of $35,000 per child. in upwards of, which, let me be clear, if it was working, if Hartford Public Schools, if Bridgeport's public schools, if New Haven's public schools, if Middletown's public schools, if Windsor, if these public schools, if these neighborhood schools were lighting it on fire, providing an equitable education for all the children who attended, hey, whatever it costs, it's worth it, right? We as citizens want to get our kids the best education possible. If we got to go into debt to make sure our children have a wonderful life, isn't that what parenting is about? But that's not the case. We're paying almost as much as we pay to incarcerate a child to send them to schools in which they are more likely to be incarcerated than they are to go off to a four-year college. So we have to hold ourselves accountable at some point and say, well, we actually know that this is going on and there is a better solution. Money should just follow the child. Because here's what's really interesting about money following, about the current school choice experience in the state of Connecticut. In the state of Connecticut, the top performing schools are either suburban, wealthy, or schools of choice, period. So magnet schools, VOTEC schools, VOAG schools, charter schools, and interdistrict choice are the highest performing schools in the state of Connecticut. So here's the irony. All those kids who are leaving those school systems are actually in better schools. They're actually in better schools. So it actually solves the problem of a failed school system by providing children access to a quality education. At one point, Hartford had 4 magnet high schools, all 4 of which were on US News and World Report's top performing high schools, with Hartford residents' children who would have otherwise been the lowest performing school systems in the state. So I'll finish here and I'll begin to answer questions. Right now, in Connecticut, almost by zip code, almost by address, you can predict a child's likelihood of going to prison or to college just by virtue of the fact of where they live, just by where they live, not because they're smart or dumb, because they have involved parents or uninvolved parents, because they play sports, nothing other than their address, nothing other than their address. And so it would follow logic, therefore, that the city that has the 2 lowest performing schools, that being Bridgeport, also is the city that has the highest percentage of residents who are incarcerated. Meanwhile, Bridgeport also has some of the highest performing schools in its schools of choice in the state. Same city, same children, different mechanism of determining where a child goes to school. That's the only difference. The only difference. And so when money follows the child, some of the big winners will be people who rarely are ever considered in the conversation around schools in Connecticut. As much of this conversation was about urban schools, some of the biggest winners will be small towns in Connecticut who have VOTEC schools or who resource VOTEC schools. Those schools are the lowest funded schools in the state at approximately $9,000 per pupil. Were money to follow the child and the funding formulas that we have in place to go forward through ECS, on average, if you allow me that in this conversation, we can get down to the nitty-gritty numbers. Kids in VOTEC schools and VOAG schools would go from receiving $9,000 per pupil to almost $13,000 at no additional cost to the state of Connecticut. The taxpayers of Connecticut would not pay any more money simply by shifting the way in which we fund by allowing money to follow the child. So I'll pause there. My good friend and colleague Nathan is on board, and we'll be able to answer your questions as specifically as they are.
Well, we do have a question in the chat. I think we can raise our hands. You can find that under reactions. There's a hand raise. And then we have questions in the chat too. But Jose Pimentel has raised his hand. Go ahead, Jose.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Perry, for having this amazing chat. My name is Jose Pimentel from Denver Prospect, in Danbury and also working with Latinos for Educational Advocacy. We've been working really hard in Danbury to get us a charter school, but we ran into some political headwinds, especially the fact that after 2015, we have to literally go through legislative approval to get funding. So we've been stuck for the last 5 years. But one of my questions is that at the same time, I've had Kimberly reach out, and then I had another proposal reached out, and it kind of got me a little bit confused. So my question was, what is the big difference between the SB 948 and SB 949? And the way that they were presenting it was really trying to say, how do you get enough approval by all the legislators, many of whom might be afraid they're losing funds? But the way Dr. Perry kind of described it, I think that if that formula was written out more in detail, then you can make the same case that the city's not losing that money, because all those kids going to the charter schools, magnet schools, they would receive more money. So I think somehow by having two bills, it's almost kind of splitting up the movement, and I'm trying to figure out why did that happen, and is there any way to reconcile? Because the way you mention it, we can basically say we're not losing money to the representative. You're getting their money now to the charter school or their magnet school. But I basically had two proposals, and I got really confused.
Thank you so much, Jose. So the best way to answer this is that if you were to ask anyone who is involved in the conversation around money follows the child, what do they believe is the most elegant solution? Which do they think is the most equitable, and which do they think is the most necessary? I would venture a guess, based upon my conversations with those individuals, that they would say that they believe that our money follows the child proposal is the most elegant solution, the most equitable, and the one that should be put in play. So that's what they have said, and that's what they would say. What they may also say, and these are friends, what they may also say is that they're afraid that our friends who are politicians will look at what is the best solution, but cower, and as a result, won't support what they believe to be the best solution. And so in those other scenarios, what they're essentially attempting to do is to extend the hold harmless experience by adding more money to the duplicitous funding to the tune of over $400 million a year in at least one version.
420. Yes,
$420 million a year on top of the 360. And they're also in one iteration attempting to create an opportunity to continue to fund seats for children who do not attend those schools. I have no allegiance to any school system. In fact, in this conversation, even though I am a charter operator, you've not heard me talk about charter schools. You hear me talking about kids. You hear me talking about equity. You hear me talking about being a citizen of this country and a resident of this state. You hear me talking about what is best for all children. And so you'll forgive me if I'm not in a hurry to keep people employed in schools that are virtually empty. You'll forgive me if I don't fall for the okey doke of, well, we have to keep our public schools open when no one is there, when they've lost 70% of their enrollment. Why would I pay to keep middle-class suburbanites employed in those schools when I can pay for the education of the poor children for whom we've collected taxes? So if I'm truly fighting for equity in my scenario, what I want to do is I want to say to children who live in places like Haddam or Durham, who decide to go up to Vinyl Tech, you are as valuable a child as any other child in the state. And so I'm not going to say to you, because you want to continue to work in your family's business, which is a small family farm, that's not the same value as a charter school. Our problem has been that we spend too much time pitting one against the other. I'm saying that every child in the state of Connecticut is that family's very best child. It's the best that they have in the house. Nobody says, hey, I'm going to keep the good kids for myself. You take the crazy one. Everyone sends us the best kids. And so if we believe that all children are created equal and endowed with certain inalienable rights, then we have to treat them all the same. But if we also believe that we cannot consistently spend money that we don't have to keep a system which, for the record, is only about keeping middle-class individuals like many of us who live in the suburbs, like many of us, in jobs that are not doing what it is that we're paying people to do.
I think it merits interjecting here that what SB 948, the bill that you were alluding to, does is that by statute. It states that students in these schools who don't attend their neighborhood schools, they shall be counted in their district schools enrollment in perpetuity. So magnet schools will continue to be counted in. The double spend will continue to happen every single year as it has been happening. And big point of contrast is that our Black letter language says that they shall not be included in enrollment totals for the purposes of ECS calculation.
So for us, the big difference is this. We came to you, we came to the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus, we came to anyone who would listen to us. And we said very simply, we want money to file a child based upon the ECS formula that's already in place. If you want to change the ECS formula, that's on you. We want there to be an equitable distribution of the money, and we want it to go to the school that the child attends. And we are not going to negotiate against ourselves before we even get out of first gear. I'm not going to come to you and say, well, you know, I'll take a lesser version of what I believe in before we've even tried. I'll finish here. My job is to work with children who many people have given up upon. And I have to believe in what is otherwise seen as impossible, that every single year we're going to send 100% of our graduates on a four-year college, regardless of where they come from. I'm not a politician. I'm not into the horse trading. I'm a child advocate. And as a child advocate, my job is to be able to speak to Black, white, Asian, Latin, and other parents and say to them, you support what we support, and we will work to make sure that every single child is treated fairly in the state of Connecticut. If you don't like the funding formulas, you change the funding formulas. That's not what this does. If you think more money should be collected, then you do that. All I'm saying is, I don't think it's right to count a child as going to Buckley High School who you know damn well never attended Buckley High School. And to complain as a Buckley High School employee who doesn't live in Hartford about not getting enough money is at best disingenuous. If you want to count some kids to go to Buckley High School and you're an employee at Buckley High School, send your kids there. Which you will find almost none of them do. So all I want is for our kids to go to the same schools that the teachers and the principals send their kids to. I just want our kids to go to the same schools, and we can all become one big happy family.
Thank you, Dr. Perry. Jose, I can't believe you guys have been fighting for 5 years. I mean, every year that goes by, that's a year of education for your children. Before we go to Jim Miller's question, Nathan, can you point out the lines that are that you know between SB 949 and SB 948, there are some distinctive lines in the bills, because the bill has every piece of the bill has lines that go through. Can you point out for Mr. Pimentel which lines are distinctively unique?
Yes. So in SB 948, lines 307 through 311. They contain that language that explicitly puts students who don't attend district schools in their town's ECS enrollment total. That's 307 through 311. And then it happens again in lines 1095 through 1098. So that means that 38,000 magnet school kids plus all 4,000 VOAG kids, 3,200 VOAG kids are included in their town's ECS enrollment totals.
So those are the lines that say, even though those kids do not go to the district school, they shall be paid as if going to the district school. Okay, Jim Miller, please.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Perry, for spending some time with us today. My question is, and I apologize for not having read the bill in detail, but the big issue with Connecticut right now is the state is broke, and the state creates ideas. I'll call them ideas. You know, we have an ECS formula, but this year we aren't going to be able to fully fund it, for example, because the budget doesn't add up. So we're going to fund it 80%. And in the case of charter schools, for example, you need a special line item in the budget to get the funding. So my question for you is, does 949 fix the problem and put in the statute that the ECS funding is by mandate and 100% funding per child, or does it still require an act by the legislature each budget period to decide how much to fund?
So I'm going to let Nathan come in a second, but what I want to do is answer the first part of what you were saying. Yes, the state is broke, and that's why our proposal costs the state no money. We're saying this is what you already spend, and we just want that money to go and only spend it one time. This is actually a cost savings. Our proposal is a cost savings. So no, it doesn't go through and create a new ECS formula or the underpinnings to make that happen. But I think the most important part, Nathan, if you can first talk about what the overall savings are, and these are savings, meaning you actually won't pay this. We won't pay this as residents.
Your money formula saves $135 million in year one by eliminating duplicative spending. It does not fast track into the formula. It does not fast track the full phase in of the ECS formula, which is set to take effect in FY 2028. So the percentage phase in would still continue. However, with regard to charter schools, magnet schools, VOAG schools, which currently every single legislative session is the subject of horse trading over how much we're going to increase these every year. No more of that. Those formulas, of which Connecticut has 12, the only state that has anywhere near that number. Those formulas disappear and are replaced simply by a universal funding formula designed to incorporate student need. And a charter school student who lives in Bridgeport next to a traditional public school student, their need is calibrated the exact same way. The state is required to send X and the town is required to send Y, and it levels the playing field for everybody.
So to take that one step further, so if two children come to Capital Prep Charter School in Harbor Charter School in Bridgeport, one is from West Haven and the other one is from Bridgeport, they are not funded at exactly the same amount. So we receive two different levels of funding for each one of them. The incentive for us as a school is actually to go for the higher funding children, which means that to go for those children who are the neediest children, because therefore you'll get the greatest amount of money, if that's what drives you. So what it also does is our bill cuts down on the waste by making sure that the money only goes not just to the school that the child attends, but only the school that the child attends, meaning one, when they get into that school, and then two, through the 3 payments throughout the year. So if a child's no longer in that school, then there's no reason to send that money. And so the final part is that it removes the need for this silly situation where you have 12 different funding formulas. It says a child is a child is a child, regardless of what school they are attending. And so if that child is in a magnet school, then whatever the ECS is for them, and again, that's a different situation, the ECS, and that's something that could be argued, but this mechanism makes everything possible. The ECS formula is based upon their town of residence. And it doesn't matter what school they end up at. And this is the difference. Right now, the way it works is if they end up at a VOTEC school, then they're only worth $9,000. If they end up at a VOAG school, then they're only worth 8 and some change. If they end up at a magnet school, they're worth 14. But if they end up at an interdistrict choice, they're worth 17, and on and on. It doesn't make any sense. The services that we all are supposed to provide are the same. So, and it's for the children. So it should be driven at the same number. So we've created a universal mechanism and a universal formula that will allow for every child to be counted equitably, and that no school system receives money for children that they don't have. Let me also add this other part. One of the first places that people go when they have this conversation about money following the child is with the presumption that they're going to lose kids, meaning that they're going to lose money. And so they don't want to be able to, they don't want to be held accountable for losing money. They want to be let free to take money regardless of whether or not the kids go to that school. What is rarely ever considered is what happens when a school system like East Hartford says, we have an international baccalaureate program, which is one of the highest performing schools in the country. Why don't we open another one? Why don't we open 3? Why don't we open 5? And why don't we become a school system that draws people in as opposed to just sends people, exports kids? We already have the physical plant. We already have the background in this type of learning. We're almost 30 years into it. And the same is true in other towns. Other towns could make the determination that they're going to allow for interdistrict choice. They're going to create other opportunities. You don't have to lose kids. And then the part of this that's rarely ever discussed is towns like New Haven are in many cases losing to towns like West Haven and Hamden, because kids from Hamden and West Haven are going to New Haven magnet schools. And New Haven's only receiving a 40% share of that child's tuition. So back at those suburban schools, they're actually receiving the lion's share of that money. So New Haven would actually gain in some cases when they get access to those kids. They could create more magnet school seats. It requires that we look at education from the perspective of children as opposed to the perspective of systems.
Okay, thank you, Jim. James Bash?
Hi, Dr. Perry. So your schools have been able to achieve really excellent outcomes, despite, I think, having probably much lower per student funding than some of your peers, and having students that by and large are coming from disadvantaged backgrounds. So I'm wondering if you could please talk to some of the other factors that you feel like drive educational outcomes outside of just per student spending. And then just as a follow-up to what you were talking about in terms of the system protecting these suburban middle-class jobs, I agree with you 100%. And to even be a little bit more specific, I think it's the system protecting union jobs, union control for union votes. And I'm wondering, to the extent that you've talked to Hartford legislators and really gone at to the heart of that issue and characterized it for what it is, how many of them can actually be genuine in calling that out for the sake of our kids?
So I'm going to start at the first part of your question. What I remember is the first part of your question. First part of the question that I remember is you making the point that we probably receive less money than the neighborhood schools, and we serve the exact same kids.
And you have better results. So there are other factors that are driving educational outcomes, and
No
what
doubt.
do you feel like those are?
Yep, I'm going to get there. just to explain just how much less we receive, there are 24 schools, I think, in Bridgeport. Of the 24 schools in Bridgeport, we are 23rd in overall spending.
Wow.
Yet among the top 2 in overall performance. So it's clearly not money. It is what you say. Our first school is Capital Prep in Hartford. It's a magnet school in Hartford Public Schools. I worked in Hartford Public Schools for 10 years. I served my time there. And one of the reasons I left is because we had 2,700 children on our waiting list. We had a US News and World Report top performing high school. We weren't just good in the classroom, we were good in sports. We were good all the way around. And so we had all these children who wanted to get in, and we were surrounded by failed schools. And the Board of Education said, while we acknowledge your performance, it would be too much power for one man to allow you to expand your school to another building. What they said, it's on record. And it wasn't that I was afraid to fight, because that's what I'm built to do. But it just got old after a while, because we were not even talking about children anymore. It had never been about kids. It was about keeping union jobs, teachers' union jobs. That's all it was. It's not about teachers, because there are teachers who work at Catholic schools and private schools, and there are teachers who do homeschooling. It was not about teachers. It's about union teachers. That's it. Who pay approximately $1,200 a year in dues. That's all it is. It's not about equity. Only 4% of all the teachers in the state of Connecticut are Black. Only 4%. So it's clearly not about equity. It's about a particular group of people keeping their jobs and keeping their lifestyle. And so when we began our conversation about money follows a child, I need you to understand the strategy that we began with, which is a very different strategy than most people would consider. We started our conversation with the Black and Puerto Rican caucus. We did not come to the right. We did not go to the progressives. We went to the Black and Puerto Rican caucus. And we sat down with them specifically. And I said to them, brothers and sisters, I need y'all to understand, I know you send your kids to school. I do. I know that many of you use school choice. I know that many of you have benefited from school choice. I know that you actually believe in school choice. You believe that a child should have a right to go to school, the best school for them. Now, there are some who we didn't speak with who are union flunkies, but for the most part, every single member that I spoke with of the Black and Puerto Rican caucus supports what we're doing. So much so that all 3 of the bills that you're looking at come from BPRC members. All 3. And one of them comes from Doug McCrory, who is a BPRC member, a senator, and a resident of Hartford, a lifelong resident of Hartford. So do I think some of the, call them progressives, are going to support this? Hell no. No. Do I think that people who get their street cred from the esoteric poverty lies that they tell about why children are underperforming? No, I'm not counting on them, but I'm counting on you. I'm counting on our friends on the right, and I'm counting on the BPRC to stand up for what you believe in. I know what they believe in. They believe in hypocrisy. They believe, like Luke Bronin believes, that you can be the mayor of a town who claims to be pro-public schools, but you send your children to private schools. I'm not messing with hypocrites. I ain't got time for that. I'm not going to sit here and waste my time running around trying to convince somebody who's lying about what they do. I'm not going to, I think his name is Matt Hennessy, who sent his child to a charter school, but he's against charters. Come on, man, I don't have time for that. Like, well, I don't think we live forever. So I don't have time to get into foolishness with people who are being disingenuous, who are lying to their community. I have no problem calling them out as liars. But what I'm not going to do is try and get their vote. I'll take that one on the chin. I'm cool with that. Don't vote for it. That's all right. We'll remember you. So what I know is that the people with whom I've spoken understand that one of the main reasons why our schools have begun in these poor communities and outperformed even the suburbs is because we're allowed to hire who we want to hire. I don't negotiate with some clown who's in the union. When we started our first school, this is a true story. It came down to me. This is a true story. These people came into my school and said, we'd like to talk to you. Like some fake Scarface movie. Like they just finished watching The Godfather. Like they sat down with me and they wanted, we'd like to talk to you. They leaned back in the chair. Like, do you know who I am? Like, do you understand who you're talking to? Do you understand what you're doing when you're doing that to me? Please put chud in the water. Please do it. And they're saying to me, you know, you should work with us when you're going to make decisions. I'm sorry. Are you my boss? You are not, huh? Kick rocks, Holmes, pound sand. That's not what we do here. You don't tell me what to do. And it's with that they made their mind up that I was public enemy number one. And I've learned that a man's life is not just judged by the friends he makes, but by the enemies he makes. And I am very comfortable that the CEA doesn't like me because I don't like them either at all. Because most of them benefit from school choice on one level or another, and none of them send their kids to the failed schools that they're collecting the most amount of money from. This is the final point I'll make on this. The largest school systems have the most teachers paying the most dues. We have to look past that very simple fact. Yet none of them send their kids to those damn schools. None of them. None of them. I want you to go to Weaver, Hartford Public Buckley. I want you to go to Central, Harding, and Bassick. I want you to go to Hill House and all those schools. And I want you to stand all the teachers up and say, who brought your child with you to school today? Raise your hand. You will get to keep your job if you brought your child to this school. Be a whole bunch of silence in that building. Principals, please raise your hands if your child attends this school. Superintendents, where does your child go to school? The superintendent of Hartford Public Schools talks about growing up in Hartford. But apparently they stopped selling houses in Hartford when she got the job as superintendent because she wasn't able to buy a house or send her children to even a magnet school in those towns. Josh Hall, an African-American, union guy, public school teacher, sends his kids to a magnet school. Come on, man, I ain't got time for this. Y'all ain't gonna sit here and play with me.
So
I know who the bosses are.
So if I could just say one more thing, since I knew you back when I was 22 at Wesleyan, you were head of that Career Resource Center for those who weren't on, and you were really good at your job, Steve. But I got to tell you, I am so glad you're not doing any more and doing this. Thank you.
Well, you can thank Wesleyan because they fired me after I ran for state representative and told them that they needed to give up that piece of property that they turned into the lacrosse field and turn it into a place for the community. So
I'm glad God had a different plan. Let's put it that way.
as am I. I've never been happier to be fired from anything, except for I was fired from a job as a dishwasher too, but that's all right. I wasn't good at that either.
Take care, Steve. It's good to see you again.
Thank you, James. Faith Ham is next.
Hi, it's Dr. Perry, Steve Perry, thank you so much. This is wonderful. I just want to say there are some of us on this call who are members of boards of education. I'm sorry. And if we're found out, my guess is our terms are going to be severely limited, but that's okay too. I'm just curious, how would you advise us who are strong advocates for money file the child to advocate for this bill? And then specifically, how do we deal with minimum budget requirement statutes? And what about funding for special ed kids also? I mean, how does this all work?
Those are great questions, Ms. Ham. And let me start with the first. How do you advocate for this? Well, you can't. selling equity to people who don't believe in it is hard to do. It's hard to do. So another way to think about it is it goes both ways. We don't just have to lose money. We can also gain money by bringing children into our school system. Those children, our kids don't have to leave. See, as a person who runs charter schools, this is where it will come into this conversation. I have to be customer service friendly. Parent says she's pulling her child out. Whoa, wait a minute. Wait a minute. When you say pull, what do you mean? Why do you want to pull her? Let's see if we can talk about this. Let's have a conversation about what it is that we do and don't do, and how can we work with you? We're here to serve you. We're here to serve you. So what it does is it creates a level of accountability to the public. We're public schools. To the public. Like, what's more public than the public voting with their feet? If the public's saying that they don't want what we have, then we owe it to them to give them what they desire. That's what public service is to give the public what they desire, not what some special interest group says that they're prepared to give them. So what we have to do is we have to have conversations with our colleagues. And to me, it always starts with, who made you send your child to a particular school? Who was standing over your shoulder making you send your child to this school? Nobody, right? Okay, so we want for other people's children what you got for yours. So that conversation is one about equity. Then it goes into, you can also bring people to your school system. You can create the opportunity to expand programs that you have in your school system. It's nothing bad is going to happen to you if kids come from the nearby town. It's the strangest thing. We create these invisible barriers and we treat them as if they actually mean something. Like, there is really a difference between Haddam and Killingworth, like, for real. Like, seriously, they're towns, and like Middletown and Portland, like, they're just towns, and that's what they are. So that they could bring people in is one thing. And then the MBR, it's the same situation that you have when you do outplacements now. So your MBR does not go down when a child goes to a special needs school. So if a child is outplaced at a special needs academy, no one says that your district is less $80,000 next year because you spent less on your kids' public education. That's still seen as the public providing that education. And that's just in practice. That's the way it is. One of our board members for one of our schools is a board member in Bridgeport, who also supports Money Follows the Child, as many board members do. And she says that the second highest budget item on their budget is the outplacement of children to third-party placements.
Yeah.
So that's that doesn't count against your MBR. It's seen as an expense for educating your children. Much in the same way, when a child in I'm not sure which town are you in?
Cheshire.
Okay. So the same as when a child is in Cheshire and she is receiving services, but she goes to another town. Let's say she goes to a magnet school in a nearby town. If she needed special education services, Cheshire would either send the money in terms of paying for the service, or they would send a staffer. Neither of those are counted against your MBR. They're just not. They're seen as part of your expenses. So when I ran the magnet school in Hartford, some towns like Granby would just send us money. We would send them a bill for what the child's services were, and they would just send us the money. Other towns like Middletown would send us a social worker. They wouldn't pay for the social worker. They would send a social worker who would work among the schools in Hartford. And then she would go from one, but she was still an employee of Middletown's public schools. And we had no say over whether or not she was to come back. They sent her. That wasn't, in both cases, they provided special education support differently, but in neither case did it count against their MBR, which brings me to my last point. As it relates to special education, this does not solve that problem. It doesn't. It's the first step, but it is not the solution. Let me tell you what I mean. In New York, what they do is they provide funding based upon the percentage of the day that the child spends in a special need setting. So if they spend 100% of their day in a special needs setting, they get 100% of the money. It could be another $20,000 that goes to the child. They send 10%, it's like $1,000 that goes to it. So it's dependent upon what percentage of the time they spend in special needs. Up to 50%, they get this, they get that. Connecticut today has no mechanism of accounting for the differences between a child who has special needs and not. The way that Connecticut currently deals with it is, if at all, is by partially sticking their head in the sand and just saying, I don't recognize there are special needs kids. There are no special needs kids, all kids, right? They just say that. And the other thing that they do is they take the mean for the district and they distribute that, knowing that some kids won't have services and some kids will have services. And between those two, they believe that they have enough to provide the services that are necessary. There's also money that they get from Title I and some other services that they get. But generally speaking, there is no, that I can see among the 12 funding formulas, there's nothing that specifically accounts for special needs. Nathan, am I off on that?
No, 1,000,000%. Connecticut funds special needs in a backwards way that other states do not. Like Steve said, in New York, it's calibrated based on the percentage of time that the student actually spends in different types of settings, and it's very granular. Connecticut doesn't actually incorporate special needs factors into the education cost sharing formula, the flagship formula that we are putting all students into. So if the first movie of fixing Connecticut education funding is Money Follows the Child for general education students, I think the sequel would be getting special education students into an equitable Money Follows the Child system, but we're not quite there yet.
Jose, I don't know if you had another question, but is it okay if I go to someone who has a new question? Where you ask us that? Okay, so I'll come back to you. Next is Noreen Kokoruda. And then Kenny.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for having this. I just finished up 10 years as a state rep, and I was on the education committee that whole time. And Dr. Perry, thank you so much. We've met. I know we've talked about some of my votes that you were happy with. When I got there in Hartford, my main reason in education, and I apologize for this, I'm ashamed of it, was just to try to get more money for my district. And I got up there and saw what was going on in Connecticut. And right after I arrived at the same time Governor Malloy did, and he put as you remember, an education reform bill up. And in those days, 33 people were on the education committee. We sat in a circle, and the representatives representing the poorest communities, the lowest performing communities, with the exception of Doug McCrory, would not get up and talk. I spoke to one of them that has come along now, but he said they were encouraged not to talk. We had a bill that did some really good things. The union took it, totally changed it. That's the bill we voted out of committee. Thank God it was changed again. I know Doug McCrory worked hard, the unions worked hard, but the bill the unions gave us was really a total joke. And I remember saying at that meeting, I was really new, I was saying, well, if you folks that have the low performing schools are okay with this, I guess I should be. Well, they all come up to me afterwards, and until the Black and Latino caucus steps up, and until people insist that their legislators definitely demand accountability in our school system, it's never going to happen. I've seen legislators in the Black Latino caucus get up and just slam charters when they know it's not true. And now there are a lot that support it, but we also have the op-ed from Mayor Elliker from New Haven. He talks about needing more money. He never mentions that he doesn't support charters. He doesn't mention that he doesn't support open classroom, open choice. And this is what the problem is. And I just want to say, Dr. Perry, when it comes to MBR, and Nathan, you also, it is such a fraud, MBR. And we've gotten some reform on it, but it's ridiculous. So the town said they're going to spend $20,000 or $15,000 on a child. Next year, they have 100 less students. They have to spend that same amount. And because special education is based on 4.5 times what you spend per child, that means every year your target to get funding for special education you get farther and farther away from it. And that's the plan. So as you go up every year, my town, Madison, has seen a 26% drop in enrollment, but we have not been able to get, and they say you can apply First of all, a lot of superintendents don't want to apply, and the ones that do quite often are turned down. So that has to be looked at. Every year we'd put something up with MBR, but they cover themselves by saying you can appeal it. Someone should take a look at how often really an appeal happens. So thank you for this. Dr. Perry, keep up the good work. We need this done. Doug McCrory at one point was the only one up there with a vote, with a voice. I'm so happy that others have followed him. It is a shame what's happening in our school system. And what I learned in 10 years being up there, I wasn't up there to get more money for my town. I was telling my town, we're sending this money. Let's make sure the kids are getting educated. And I have to say, because of the power of the unions, and I'm one of the ones that the unions usually endorse, my teachers are wonderful in my community, but they don't stand up to their unions, what the unions are doing. Intelligent superintendents have said to me, charter schools take money away from public schools. They believe it. They're taught that. And that's the problem with so many of the communities that want change. And when we listen to Mayor Bronin, what a shame that I had so many high hopes for him, but he's missing it when it comes to the kids of Hartford, just missing it. And it's all because of allegiance and getting endorsed during election time. We've got to start pushing our legislators to vote for the kids. And if we don't start pushing it, I don't know who else is going to. But Dr. Perry, keep working with the Black and Latino Caucus. They've done some good things. I'm very hopeful for them. They've come a long way, but some of them are still afraid. They won't speak out. But thank you very much.
My pleasure. I was 2 years ago, I was at the State Department of Education, and we were sitting before the board, and I watched as the board members claimed that charter schools were taking money from neighborhood schools. The State Board of Education members, the people who actually determine whether or not charter schools are given the opportunity to exist, were saying that charter schools take money from neighborhood schools. And, I didn't get a chance to present, but I have said that having a charter school in your town is akin to having a state police barracks. You can have a state police barracks and you just have two police officers. You have a state cop and a local cop. And one doesn't take away from the other. One is paid for outside of your town, but you get to benefit from in your town. And the other one is paid for in your town and you get to benefit from in your town. So you actually get two for the price of one. So when you have a charter school, you get two schools for the price of one. And in the current configuration, you get two schools and you get but you get to keep twice as much money. So that child who's left your school, you still get paid for him or her. So I appreciate what you've done and thank you for your service to our community as a whole.
Thank you, Noreen. And Mr. Kenny Green next.
Sure, thanks. This has been great. Thank you, Representative Fiorillo, for the invite. This has been amazing. I have a couple pages of notes, so thanks, Dr. Perry. So my name is Kenny Green. I'm a CPA, also a charter school parent, social justice advocate, and just like James, ironically, I'm a Wesleyan grad too, also class of 1998. So I met you on Wesleyan's campus as well. So I'm glad to see you here today. But my question here is that, the facts you've laid out here just seems like a no-brainer. And a lot of people are asking, why isn't this already done? But just want to know, in particular for the Black and Brown students that are left in the public schools after this is in place, how do you see the quality of their education being affected by this? Do you see it going up, down, stay the same? Like, what are your thoughts?
That's a great question, and it's a pleasure to see you again. So there's some research out of Arizona that talks about the impact that school choice has writ large. A lot of research, actually, that shows that it actually improves for everyone. But this notion of children being left behind is a direct result of the limitation of choice. I'll continue. Many people think that the Titanic sunk because it ran afoul of an iceberg. That would make sense, but that's not what happened. What happened is the captain was warned 6 times 6 separate times that if he did not change his course, he would hit an iceberg. But it was he who made the decision to continue the course, despite the fact he was in treacherous waters to begin with. For those of us who continue the course of sending children to schools that we know are not educating them, there's no question, right? We might as well study if water is wet or fire is hot. We know that these schools are not teaching children to read, write, and compute. That's just gone. Then the question to your earlier question is, why haven't we done this already? This would be to expand choice. As I mentioned, 11,000 children are leaving Hartford every single day to go to another school. The question is not what happens to the kids who are left behind. The question is really, how many kids would stay if they had another choice? Because we know that 60% are out. So if we offer up more choices, which would include interdistrict choice, which would include the expansion of magnet schools, expansion of VOTEC schools, expansion of VOAG schools, expansion of charter schools, expansions of choice opportunities, then how many children would even stay? We have been led to believe because George Bush put in place what will go down as the most important education reform in American history, in No Child Left Behind, which the teachers' unions initially agreed with, and then they disagreed once it became clear that if your school continued to fail to educate children, you were going to lose money and potentially lose jobs, which meant you were going to lose revenue to your union. Then they were disagreeing with it. Then they did the play on words of you're leaving children behind. But no one thinks of leaving children behind when they make those decisions for themselves. No one says, you know what? I don't want to have these kids left behind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep my kids in a failed school. The only time we think about those kids is when they're in our rearview mirror. And I'm saying, don't leave them behind, take them with you. Create the same opportunities that we have, which means that for those of us who send our children to charter schools or magnet schools or VOTEC schools or suburban schools or whatever, let's let the same thing happen for everybody. And the final point is this. Years ago, I've since told who the person was, but years ago, I was asked to consider becoming the commissioner of a city's education department. And that city is Newark. And at the time, the mayor was Cory Booker. And they had just received $100 million from Mark Zuckerberg. And when we sat down, then Mayor Booker and I said to him, look, brother, let me just be honest with you. You don't want me to be your commissioner, because what I'm going to do is not going to endear you to the unions. As it is, you can't run all the schools that you have. And since you can't run all these schools, why would I continue to give them to you to run? And so there's a belief that I have, feigning as it is, that maybe one of the reasons why so many of these large urban school systems are so awful is because they have too many schools to run. Maybe if they had just a few schools to run, they might actually be better at it. But whether they will or will not be, I'm not going to leave that up to me. I'm going to leave it up to the families to vote with their feet. And so if they don't want to be there anymore, they should not have to be there anymore.
Thank you, Dr. Perry. We'll go to Peter Schur and then back to Jose.
Hi, I guess it's Steve. Hi, Steve. Thanks so much for your presentation. I'm on the Board of Education in Greenwich, have been for 12 years. We're a community that, you know, our problems are, well, let's call it what it is. Our problems are rich people problems, right? But we have problems nonetheless. And everything you guys talk about, unions, all the rest of it, I mean, we are ossified in how our school system runs. And it's frustrating. I was listening to the woman from Madison. Her situation's probably not unlike ours. But one of the things that's really, really, really hard in this discussion is I'm with you 110%. And I'd love to, you know, get out of my bubble here and support whatever's happening elsewhere. Because if you're in this racket in any way, shape, or form, you're in it for kids. And but the thing I'm listening to you guys in this is I don't know how to help, and I want to help. The second thing is I'm trying to understand where we are in this fight. Are we, you know, early days, or do we actually have a chance of winning sometime soon? And I would just love to hear your perspective, I guess Nathan's perspective. I see my buddy Gwen's on here, love her to death. I just would love to know how to help, and I would love to try to help get other people involved in this cause to make this happen, because I'm with you 110%. If you can fundamentally upend the system by getting the money to follow the kid, you've broken the back of a broken system, and then something new and better is going to emerge from that. I don't know what it is, but I have faith that something vastly better will emerge. I want to help. How can I help? And what could you tell me to get other people to do?
Mr. Chair, first of all, thank you for your service on the Board of Education. As thankless jobs go, you might be at the front of the list. I really do.
I don't know about that, but yeah, thank you for saying that.
So you're welcome. So where we are is we have a bill in the legislature, and we need people like us who are bipartisan, multicultural throughout the entire state to stand up and say that there may be many things upon which we disagree. But on this thing, we agree. We agree that whether you're in Greenwich or Hartford, if a child does not attend your school, then we shouldn't be collecting money on that child's behalf. We should not take tuition for a child that we're not educating. It's just that simple. And conversely, if we are receiving that child, then we should receive all the tuition that child has collected that has been collected on a child's behalf. It's really simple. And so on the very basic sense, we flood the testimonies on Wednesday. And we go in hard, and we push hard, and we have our friends come on, and we have them push hard. And then we reach out to our legislators who get scary because they think that the big bad union is going to come in and do something to them. But I'll share with you, we often overstate the power of the teachers union profoundly. You know, one of the things that I'm impressed with Mr. Stepanowski, who ran for governor, is that in a blue state, he lost by 1%. If the teachers union had so much juice, he should have been stopped, but he wasn't. It shouldn't have been close. In a blue state with a highly polarizing president at that time, come on, man. It shouldn't have been close. So if they had so much juice, then why didn't they do something? And they're not giving as much money as people think that they are. What they do is they intimidate. That's what they do. They actually physically go up and they try to intimidate people. And if you're easily intimidated, then they'll get at you. But for me, it's a breaking down of what it is. Who is this person coming at me? So I'm supposed to think a teacher's going to beat me up? For real? Wow. Okay, well, that's a fight I'm prepared to take. That one I'm good with. especially an old teacher. So an old teacher's gonna come fight me? Okay, well, that again, I'm very, very comfortable with that as well. So we have to look at what their tactics are. Their tactics are, especially when they're talking to Republicans, is to call you guys racist. There is no more racist move than to leave children in failed schools and say that they've done it to themselves. There is no more profoundly racist system in the United States of America than the one that was designed to keep kids away from one another. When you, the GOP, are the ones who are saying, actually, that's not our fight, man. We're not telling them not to come to our school system. Stop saying that about us. We're not doing that. Just because we can afford to live in a different community doesn't mean that we don't want other people to live there. It just means we do want to live there. And so you're not going to pin that on me. If you want to, if a racist is going to call me a racist, then I'm comfortable sending that back at you, Chief. You don't get to call me a racist because I am fighting a system that is racist, that negatively and consistently impacts children of color.
Dr. Steve Perry runs the school in Bridgeport that staffs classrooms with Black educators at a rate higher than any other school in Bridgeport, while being funded at the second lowest level in Bridgeport.
Yeah,
So-
no, you guys got me convinced. I mean, I'm about to publish something in Greenwich called "Racism is Alive and Well in Greenwich Public Schools," and let me tell you what it is. It's I'll just say it. I mean, I don't want to get off in this conversation because that's not the point here. But it's, you know, it's wealthy white people telling other people what's good for them. I mean, if there isn't anything more racist than that, I don't know what it is. You know,
Well,
I mean, it's unbelievable, and
well,
I'm sick and tired of it.
I will say this.
So, but my point is what really frustrates me is this, you know, not to get on a rant, is this, you know, this low expectation thing. And it just rubs me every time. You know, it's like, so, but that's why I believe in what you're talking about, because I believe that, you know, crazy as I am, I don't think this thing gets fixed around the edges. It's so fundamental, it has to get upended. And I know that's, you know, it's not revolutionary, but that's really what has to happen. But then the question is, you know, once you get your brain wrapped around, okay, I believe in that and I want to make that happen. And then I meet someone like you through Kim Fiorello, which, thank you, Kim. I'm there, and I you know, I want to be allies with other people in this thing. The question is how best to get organized to really make that happen. Because as you pointed out, the union, you know, when someone talks to me about, oh, the parent education lobby, I keep saying, what parent education lobby? Okay. You know, or they'll talk about the teacher union and what have you and how they organize. No, I mean, come on. You can't get intimidated by that. It's not as big as bad as people think it is. But that doesn't mean we can't be a lot better at being organized too, to get our message out. And then the question becomes, okay, because you always run into people and say, okay, tell me what to do.
So
they'll do enough if you tell them what to do.
So I'll give you that. So the tip of the spear is very simple here. What we have to do is we have to remain focused on making sure that this bill goes all the way through, by making sure that we secure our representatives and let them know that we're not playing, that it is time for a revolution, that it is time for something meaningful. And what to me is most powerful about this moment, Dr. King talked about an idea, freedom being an idea whose time had come. What's so powerful about this is the selflessness of this. The selflessness of it. Many of you are making a decision for children who you actually don't need to make a decision for. They're not your kids, but they're your kids because they're your kids' friends. You'll see them again, like I've seen Green and Bosch, and later on in life. And you'll need to be able to look them in the face and say, what did I do when I was in a position to help them? Who was I when it was my turn to be called upon? These are not esoteric notions. These are notions upon which an entire nation was born and continues to thrive. Despite the fact that we have our grievances against one another, there has to be a unifying principle, some idea that says that we are different and better than other places. And this is the thing, that we are a nation that takes care of our children. But in this state, arguably the wealthiest state in the nation, that we are punting on first down because we're afraid that the other guy's going to tackle us makes no sense. And take your helmet off and get off the field. But if you came to play football, let's play. They're more afraid of you than you are of them. One of the ways in which, you can make an impact is to collect. For instance, we've run an ad campaign. We run the same exact ad. I'm gonna let you in on an inside secret. We've run the same exact ad on urban radio that we run on conservative talk radio. It's the exact same ad. One is read by an African-American woman and the other one is read by a white woman. Same ad, same words, same response. The urban radio station says, yeah, why don't I get to choose my child's school? Why you're right. Why do I have to only go to the school closest to my house? And the conservative talk radio says, yeah, why is it that I have to send my child to? We are aligned on this. There's a very small group that is more concerned about protecting jobs than they are protecting children. If you want to really solve the problem, the fight is not about a $15 minimum wage. It's about making sure the kids can make their way into the middle class, send them to good schools so they can take care of themselves and their family. But those jobs are typically not union jobs unless they're teaching jobs. And so what we have to do is we have to organize just like we are. We have to come together just like we have. We have to be there on that day, on Wednesday. And then we have to reach out to our legislators and other people and say, you need to get on this thing, man. We need to count on you on this. And then when we do that, our numbers lead us to believe, to your earlier question of where are we in the process, that if all the R's stay together, if the BPRC, for the most part, stays together, a couple clowns who we're not going to name, but with the exception of them, many of whom also send their children to schools of choice, which is also to be a person of color who's against school choice, who exercises school choice, but says you're for children of color, it's just too far down the fool hole for me to go. You don't make it out of a fool hole if you go that deep. Like you just end up, and then people look around like he's in a fool hole. He must be a fool. So I got to leave that person alone. But we believe that our numbers are such where if you push the R's and you push the BPRC and those people squeeze out that group, that this happens. And this, brothers and sisters, will be the single largest educational reform in the state's history, period. There's nothing closer. And so when we're talking about bringing Brooklyn Prospect to Danbury, we don't necessarily have to wait for a charter school. They could just open up a school and they could just accept kids because that's the way it would be. And I don't have to have 900 kids on my waiting list ever again. I could just accept those children because guess what? Each one of them comes with the requisite amount of tuition that they have. And a magnet school never has to have a waiting list ever again. And we don't have to worry about the chef plaintiffs coming and suing us ever again because then those kids can just go to another school. They don't have to wait for Glastonbury to say, yeah, we're only going to take 6 kids this year. So you guys have to figure out who else you're going to send kids to school. I mean, what other schools you're going to send these kids to. So where are we? We're right there. We're on the precipice of something great. We're on the precipice of the beginning, where this is not going to solve all of our problems by any means, but what it will do is it'll crack open the sky in a way in which it's never been done before. And might I add, when we're done with this first leg, it will show a weakness in the union that no one ever thought. And once you show that a bully can be popped in the mouth, she's not a bully anymore. And then when they start coming up to legislators and flinching on them and telling them, I'm going to organize against you, they'll say, go ahead. How'd that work out for you last time? We are close.
I was going to say, I've already begun popping the bully in the mouth. This has been a process that has been years in the making with Dr. Perry championing it. And we didn't begin this, a year ago, putting this legislation together and mapping the problem and our solution. It's been a long haul that's gotten us to where we are. And in terms of the significance of this moment, as I perceive it, it shouldn't be understated. It's huge that there is a bill in front of the state legislature introduced by the Education Committee and Senator McCrory. The bully has been popped in the mouth, and we are, it's first and goal right now, with a huge opportunity to not just implement the biggest change that Connecticut has seen, but the biggest structural change and fix that, to my knowledge, as an education policy person, has happened nationwide in a very long time.
28 states right now have money files a child legislation up. 28 states. Connecticut could be 29. 28 states. Last time I checked, when the majority of the country in a democracy votes for something, it makes it the will of the people. 28 states is a big deal. That's right now, with a Democrat as president. 28 from coast to coast. Some version of, now it's only 28 because there are other states that already have it, like Florida and parts of Texas, and other states already have this as a
New York,
right? So New York wouldn't be among them.
Okay, well, it's 5:25. Thank you so much. I do see some extra hands. Maybe we could make it like a lightning round. We'll let Kara go. And Jose, do you have one more question? Because I see your hand is still up.
Just quick, he almost answered it. I was just gonna ask really quick if because we would not need this line item anymore, right? With this, that money follows the child. Let's say we already have an approved school ready to go. And the fact now that we have to ask Julie Kushner and Bob Goffrey and we're stuck in this hole. But I think if it was that, then we no longer would have to do that.
You have an approved school, you'd be able to open, period. There's nothing else to discuss. This solves your problem forever, not just getting open, but staying open.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Kara Philbin.
Hi, I'm actually a Greenwich parent, and I would love to just thank Peter Schur. He's my favorite board member, and I'm usually in total agreement with him. He's a champion for education and community, and I'm very thankful. And but I do disagree on what he said. As a Greenwich parent, there are schools in Greenwich that are really struggling. And in some of the most affluent areas. And the problem there is parents, it's a good problem to have, right? They have the money to put their kids into private schools and seek choice. However, the schools that are being left have real struggles, they have real problems, and they're not being fixed for probably a lot of the same reasons that you're mentioning. My oldest daughter, a third grader, her class was the lowest in one of the most affluent areas of Greenwich, was one of the lowest performing classes in all of Greenwich. Their individual student growth ranked lower than the school than Hamilton Avenue, which has most of the diversity in Greenwich. So this is a problem for everyone. And the problem being there aren't enough voices at these small schools. And when you're a voice for these small schools and you're advocating for the right changes, you are bullied. You are targeted and bullied, and it's a small community. And word travels quickly in a small community. My family's lucky that they have a strong advocate who was able to find choice for them. And we're at a school 5 minutes away that is excellent, an excellent instructional leader with excellent teachers and, a great community experience. But this is, as I see, a problem for everyone. But my question was, I'm just curious for the schools. I like the idea of choice for the schools that are struggling, like especially in Hartford. When more and more students leave because they have choice, is that going to motivate these schools, these unions to, strengthen and better reimagine their programs, strengthen their programs, and, you know, provide a better education to draw these students back in? Or is that kind of going to be the demise of these schools? I'm just trying to better understand how that would work. Does that, I think there's a real need for accountability and incentivizing schools to do a better job. I think choice will encourage that. Will that actually work in that way? Will it motivate them to do a better job?
So an honest answer, as we talked about earlier with Mr. Green, is I don't know. My short answer is I don't know. But let me give you a complete answer. I don't understand how someone can look at a child who they know comes from some of the poorest, most disadvantaged communities in the country and not be motivated to give them all that that child deserves and more. And so I don't know if the intrinsic value of doing the right thing is ever going to move some of these folks to do the right thing. Nor do I know if the likelihood of them losing their job is going to motivate them to do the right thing.
This incredible tip is just for you.
So what that means to me is I was asked one time, I was given an award by the African American State Legislators Association, this national organization, years ago. And it was before we opened our school here in Bridgeport. And a Black legislator from Bridgeport came up to me and he said, brother, he said, what about the kids who are left behind? Like the kids who just don't get a chance to get out. They don't have involved parents. They don't have the opportunity to choose another school. I said, I'll ride with you on that one. Here, let me give you a question. He was a firefighter. I said, if there were 20 children in a burning building and you could only get 10 out, would you suggest that all 20 perish? I have no answer to what it's going to take to make a person whose job it is to teach, who is educated, certified, and employed to teach children to write, to read, to compute, to dream. I don't know what's going to make a person do that. I don't know. God knows I wish I did, because I would do it every single time in our own schools. But I know this, I'm not prepared to allow 20 to perish while we figure it out. I'm gonna get all that we can get out, and I'm gonna do all we can to put as much water on the burning building as possible to get more choices in their hands. This universal choice experience changes the scenario on education in the state of Connecticut and moves us from the back of the line to the front of the line. Other states do need-based. So they'll say, like states like Florida and others, they do a need-based, what they call scholarship. So poor kids can get it. But the term poverty is arbitrary. We don't really know what we know how much a person brings in, but we don't know how much a person has at the end of their expenses. And so a poor person, as we all know, could live in a nice neighborhood and could otherwise have a good job, but may not have income coming that supports their basics of their lifestyle. So I'm not prepared to tell that person who lives in a town, let's say like Meriden, that you're not poor enough to be given a choice to send your child to a school outside of your neighborhood. That's just not right for me. A parent who lives in Danbury, that they're not poor enough. So what we're offering up is a universal school choice experience, unlike any other, that moves Connecticut to the forefront of this conversation and presents opportunities for every single child. Someone, when we began talking about this, suggested that we phase something like this in over 12 years. I said, that doesn't even make sense. So then the children who are alive are parents by the time this thing actually happens? Some of them long before it actually happens? And we could have avoided them becoming parents by putting them in a good school? That doesn't do it. my only concern in this, and I want to be crystal clear, my only concern in this is not the solvency of our argument or the integrity of our argument. It's not the strength of what we're talking about. It's not the numbers. We've been through these numbers 100 times, and I beg anyone to look and find the hole in our numbers. Please go get it. We've flipped them one side or another. My only concern is what happens when people who know better don't speak up and don't say, you know what, I might not get back on the board of education, or you know what, I might not be elected again, or you know what, my friends may talk about me and whatever. But this is right. This is selfless. This is multicultural. It's multi-generational. And I say multi-generational because many of the people who are fighting for it don't even have kids who are in this state. They're grandparents, man. Their kids moved. I mean, really, they're not even raising kids now. But they see that right is right and wrong is wrong. So do I know that, do I think that Sand Elementary School will finally start teaching kids to read, write, and compute? Finally, despite the fact that the average income of their teachers is up around $80,000 for 180 days worth of work, with the best benefits known. Like any of us who run small organizations or small businesses know that you can't replicate what the public schools are doing. Like, try as you might. When my wife and I, when I worked in Hartford Public Schools and my wife worked for one of the insurance companies, we never used her insurance. It didn't even make sense. It wasn't even close. What we had in Hartford, it wasn't even close. It was embarrassing how much we could get with, you know. So do I know what's going to motivate them to do their damn job? I don't know.
So will the schools that are doing it well, they're going to get an influx of kids with choice. Are they scalable? Like, will they be able to handle that influx?
They will be now to a greater extent, because currently there are structural impediments to scaling in the form of VOAG schools receive less money than neighborhood schools. Charter schools receive, like Dr. Perry's school in Bridgeport, in net gets about $3,000 less than neighborhood schools.
No more than that. Let me give you the real. So before I got on this call, I was on the call with one of our funders, and one of our funders said, "You just need more staff." I said, "Really? You think so?" And in the absence, of staff, what that means is we don't have people who can do things like help us write lesson plans, help us to support teachers, help us to meet with children who have special needs, help us to meet with parents who have some support needs as well. Those are all the functions that when you run an urban school are just part of the job. It's just what you got to do in order to get kids to read, write, and compute on grade level. That's actually not their problem. They have that in the traditional school system. Bridgeport gets about $17,000 a pupil. They can say they get less. It's just not true. And the fact that we don't know exactly how much they get is always a problem. Like, why don't we know how much Bridgeport Public Schools gets? Like, seriously, like, we should know. It seems like a simple enough thing. It's public money. We should be able to say, a child in Bridgeport gets this much. You know how much a charter school gets because they tell you exactly what we get, but you don't know how much they get. So I digress. We get 11.2. They get about 17. They get a building, a Bastick, I believe, or Hardy, whatever. They just built a $110 million building. We are in a closed Catholic school where you can go and look and see a crack in our wall, like a foundational crack in our wall. Our other site is a closed mental health facility. We don't have a gym. We don't have science labs. Yet we beat them who have a brand new $20 million athletic complex and science labs. The point being, we could scale if I had more people, more hands on deck. If I could hire someone, for instance, we have, I just want to give it just really granular, just so you can understand. I want to break this down to really, because you guys have taken the time, I just want to respect your time and give you this kind of information. So when we started our school system, we started with $100,000 5 years ago. From then to now, we've grown across 2 states to $33 million in receipts, $33 million worth of tuition across multiple states. We have a CFO only. We don't have a COO. She doesn't have an assistant. She didn't even have a secretary. She has to manage that level of money. How nice would it be to have a CPA, a comptroller, to handle the almost 400 employees that we have? We don't have that. And so we make one mistake, just move one number in one place, it's lights out for us. So we can't scale today, not because we're not performing, not because we don't have interest, but because we literally don't have the bench to do some of the most basic things that schools have. Meanwhile, Bridgeport up the street here has a big old central office filled with people who can't run the schools that they have. Now, that doesn't mean that those people are unintelligent, because in many cases, they're very bright people. But for all you Knicks fans, I got news for you. Y'all will not be celebrating anytime soon. Your organization doesn't work. And so you can spend as much money, you can have the most valuable franchise, but you're not going to win until you make fundamental changes to the way in which the organization runs. So for us, I want you to understand, when we say we're not scalable right now, and to answer your really good question, yeah, if I was just a principal, no, I couldn't scale. But if I got the amount of money that these other people get, yes, I could scale. I could absolutely scale. I could hire someone, because right now the way our schools work is all I get is money just for the operation of the school, just a bare bones. But if I had just a little room, I could hire somebody whose job it was to first look for locations for schools, second, create the opportunities for those schools. I could have people working on curriculum. If I had people who could do that and didn't also have to teach it and didn't have to discipline the kids and didn't have to do all these other things, then we'd be scalable. That's the difference. And in that $5,000 difference, that's just in tuition. That doesn't even account for the building. We have to pay our rent, our salaries, our benefits out of that $11,250. We have to pay for everything out of that. They only have to pay for some of their salaries out of that 17. They don't have to pay for the buildings. They don't have to pay for the buildings and ground. They don't have to pay for the maintenance. They don't have to pay for any of that stuff. That's a whole other line item that we've all paid for them to have another brand new school. I'll finish here. I talked to someone who's on the mayor's staff here, person high up. And he told me that one of the area high schools in Bridgeport is at about 65% capacity. They have a chronic absenteeism rate of up around almost 25%, he said, which is huge. That means kids who've missed over 10% of the school year. Like, that's just not even, that's a large number. And so I said to him, well, what are you going to do? He said, build them another school. We've all heard the definition of insanity. You're going to build them a new building? Like, you're going to give them a new building to suck? How about leave them in the bad one and let them suck there for less money? How about free those kids from that school so they don't have, and then create a new school? I said to him, we have 900 kids on our waiting list. Build us a school, man. You could own it still, but give it to our kids. That's where the scalability comes in. That's where the opportunities come, is when we get equitable funding. That's the only way it happens. The only way it happens.
And you also said this potentially would lay groundwork for changing, I don't know, I'm ESA, whatever that is. I don't know, it's technical talk for me, but I feel I question a lot. I've been questioning a lot, like, my kids don't have books anymore. They used to have a great math program. Now they've got a bunch of printed handouts. Like, bring back the books. Where did the money go from the books? Like, you're saving all this money from the books. We have a great budget in Greenwich. Where does the money go? I think a lot of it we're heavy in district personnel and
Salaries?
yes, and I think, and I, anyway, so I think the money needs to be followed to the student even further. So will this lay a foundation for that as well, or like following it through the schools, or not necessarily?
What the school does when they get it is going to be at the granular school level. What we wanted to do is like we would, if you sent a Pell Grant to UConn, you just pay it. UConn does what it wants to do with it and get it.
Yeah, because I see
Thank
really
you.
for that. So I just, I hoped it was
Yeah.
verbal.
Thank you so much, Dr. Perry. We have really gone beyond at 5:45, and I really appreciate everybody's time. I did put in the link that there is a registration to testify. You have to register, and the deadline is Tuesday at 3 p.m. And I hope everyone who's on this call, this is recorded, will post it up. But you know what motivates you, and I hope there's a message here from Dr. Perry and all the people who ask questions to understand that there's a great need for the people of Connecticut to speak out for this beautiful change. And please come and support us in the Education Committee for SB 949. I serve on the Education Committee. I will be there. If you come and testify, I will ask you questions, so that we create a legislative public record for the demand for this kind of legislation. So please take that link that's in the chat. As soon as we end this call, the chat will disappear. But thank you so much. I want to leave the last word to you, Dr. Perry, to close us out.
I just want to thank all of you for caring about kids. They are the whole game. They are, I don't know about you, but they're why I wake up. The opportunity to do something that will change education as we know it and create opportunities for children, regardless of where they come from, to me, there is nothing more American than that. It is the cornerstone of our democracy, and it is the tie that binds us across racial, class, political, geographic, and economic lines. So let's get as many people as you know to sign up to speak for this bill, and then follow that up with conversations with your legislators that you call directly, and you tell them, I'm expecting you to vote for this. I am expecting you to vote for this. We can work out the numbers afterwards, but this must not go away. So thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Hopefully this was helpful.
Thank you, everybody.